And hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Talking Tech Tips with Terry, Tuesday at 2. I'm Terry Brock, your host. And hey, today I am so excited because we've got something happening now. Two wonderful people joining me right now, David Moffet and Jane Bandy, joining us from their home over in Australia. Greetings. Glad to have both of you here.
Oh, it's lovely
Terry,
to
it's a
be
pleasure
here,
to be
Terry.
here.
Thank you so much.
And we're
It's
going to
trying
have
not to
some fun
talk over,
times.
Jane.
Now, by way of introduction, these two are just incredibly wonderful, and they help dentists around the world, not only in Australia. But I wanted to tap into them because, well, we've known each other for, I guess, about 1,000 years now. It's been a while since we met on some trips I made over to Australia, and they have such a high reputation of helping people in Australia and elsewhere. I thought, well, let's get them on here so we can talk about what's happening, what kind of technology is being used over in Australia and elsewhere, and just find out kind of how it's going. David is a retired dentist. He doesn't do the drilling of teeth anymore, teaching people. And Jane is an expert on everything dentistry because she, although not a dentist, she works with front offices and helps people in their marketing and helps to generate some massive results for dentisting humans, as Paul Goodman likes to call them, the dentisting humans around the world and working with them. So both of you, really good to have you here today on that. I'm kind of curious to find out how things are going in the dental community from the big picture point of view in the midst of COVID. Now we're in 2021. How's it going? Jane, we'll start with you first. What do you see happening in the world of dentistry, particularly over in Australia?
Oh, it's been very interesting times, Terry. And you know, I've had the privilege of working with lots of dental practices and dentists and their teams here in Australia, but also in the States and in the UK. So it's interesting to see how it's all affecting, especially slightly different from country to country because of obviously how the pandemic has hit us all internationally. But, you know, there's that commonality. I think in a strange way, it sort of brought the profession together. But, you know, I think what I actually saw was I saw the dental practices that really did not only survive but flourish during this time were the ones who did those pivots that they knew they couldn't sit still and keep doing what they were doing. And the fascinating part was I had to do the same in how I delivered everything to them. So able to go into people's practices anymore, that everything had to be online. We had to look at getting them used to a different way of communicating with their patients as well. So, you know, it's been an interesting journey. So it's great that, you know, when you think about technology, that the technology that we've got, I think now we're using more than ever.
Yes.
You know, dentists, yeah, it's not just the technology the dentists have in their practice, but it's we use that to better communicate with our patients and also training and all those areas. So it has been definitely interesting times.
Oh, yeah. I think that's an understatement. Interesting times. We've seen that here in the dental community in the States as well. And David, you have worked with many dentists, helping them to really up their practice to be able to bring in more money and work with that. You're using technology a lot as well. What kind of technologies have you seen that are being particularly helpful to dentists?
Well, I think one of the best technologies, Terry, Jane and I were able to pivot our consulting business more by good fortune with our timing. At the start of 2020, we decided to wind back our tours and our speaking tours and talk more remotely ahead of the need that it came with COVID lockdowns and travel restrictions. So we were already doing Zoom meetings, which I think is a great way to talk to teams and also talk to dentists face to face, as we're doing here today, but be able to talk to multiple practices at once and also to reduce travel time between practices. So it's been great for us to be able to spread the message wider more quickly because, you know, in a morning we can talk to 3 or 4 practices in 3 or 4 different parts of the world and each have an individual conversation with them. So it's allowed us to bring our message. But ultimately, Terry, the message that we have been bringing, both Jane and I, to our practices is that we We need to be serving our customers. We need to be
Yes.
serving our practices, and our practices need to be serving their patients. And so importantly, sometimes dental practices get away from the human element and start getting into the teeth and the technical element too much, and the patient's eyes glaze over. Sometimes the patient just wants, they want a metaphorical hug, really,
Mm.
to know that you care.
Yeah,
And so
sometimes
that's the
I'd
message
say
that
they
we're
even
putting
need that
back.
metaphorical hug.
Yes. So it's important to remember that, to get back to just asking people, questions about how are they going, what have they been up to, and remain in that communication mode, especially during COVID when we can't be treating people, because those who have relied on treatment to promote their business, all of a sudden they've got nothing. They really did need to be able to talk to their patients, reassure them, keep in touch with them, even on a daily basis or every second day. Just ring up saying, how are you? Just ring to check in and make sure you're okay. Because isolation is a horrible thing.
Yes.
I was talking to a dentist in Manhattan. He said 18 of his patients, their first trip outside their front door was to his dental practice.
Mm.
Other than that, everything was home delivered. Everything was home delivered. 18 patients in a 9-month period. That's staggering to think how bad COVID has affected some parts of the world in terms of people's mobility and their usual day-to-day habits. So dental practices have had to pivot to that, because obviously we can't virtually fix teeth, but we can virtually talk to people.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's the key. We're seeing that right now. We at Dental Nachos are doing the same thing, pivoting into that. Fortunately, we've been using Zoom for a few years now in actual practice. So when they talk about Zoom, hey, we've been doing it. And it's kind of nice, thanks to Dr. Nachos himself, Paul Goodman, saying, yeah, we're going to do that. Well, as we look at some of the technology there, before we were getting the recording going here, Jane, you mentioned something to me that I just really got my ears perked up, of dentists that you knew, of, I think, Dental Dan, you were saying, over in Australia. And he's doing some unique things in social media that I know our listeners will want to find out. Tell us a little bit about what Dental Dan is doing and the results he's getting.
Oh, now I'm going to have to do a blatant plug for one of my clients.
Well, please do.
I know I will. Their practice is at Penrith, which is, obviously, if people know David and I, that's our favourite football team. That's who we barrack for. But they're in western suburbs in Sydney, and their name's Bella Dental Penrith. So look them up. And they're doing, wonderful things on Instagram. Now, David's got his
And David, what hat is that?
Hat there.
This is my Penrith Panthers hat, Terry.
Oh, okay.
Never far from me a Penrith Panthers figure.
Very good.
So you can imagine how thrilled we were when, to have a client that actually well. But what happened was Dan was employed as a hygienist, and he approached Dr. Jeff just to say, look, I can do some great things for you on Instagram. So that's what he's done. And he has this great presence. They have a lot of young families. There's, lots of pictures being spread around on all different, groups in Facebook as well. And I'll share this with you shortly, but I've also got the privilege where I actually listen to phone calls coming into dental practices. So, not only am I listening to patients, but I'm also listening to the team members as well. But it's really fascinating to listen to the types of patients that are calling up and where they're coming from, what their referral sources are. And so many of them have said, I've been talking to Dan on, through Instagram, and I thought this would be the place that I'd want to bring my family. And just, it's going quite amazing for them. And, that's made a big difference in their business. So,
I think so.
And during COVID, I think.
Yeah, I like what you were saying there about Instagram.
And I think
we're seeing that particularly a lot with dentists because it's very visual. And you can say a lot of before and after, a lot of things like that. We're seeing a lot of dentists using that. So that's good. Well, I wish we had more time. We've only got a few minutes here, but this is really good. You two are amazing. Before we let you get away, I'm going to get it again. But how does someone get in touch with you if they say, hey, we want to find out more about what you're doing, the services you offer, which are now available worldwide? As long as it's available with an internet near you, can do it. David, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you?
Well, Terry, the easiest way to get in touch with me is to send me an email or go to my website, which is theultimatepatientexperience, all in one word.com, theultimatepatientexperience.com, or send me an email, David at the theupe.com, and I'll respond pretty well, unless I'm asleep, which I only sleep about 4 or 5 hours a night. So I'll respond pretty well straight away, Terry, to that form of communication. But more excitingly, Terry, Jane is doing a webinar to the Dentaltown audience tonight, and about what she's doing in training dental front officers, and that's quite exciting. We've got over 200 people registered already, and if anyone from the Dental Nutshos wants to join that webinar, 8 o'clock Eastern time, we can share the link with you. I think I've forwarded it to you, so you can share it with your viewers. That'd be great. But Jane, how do people get in touch with you other than tuning into the webinar tonight?
Okay, they can shoot me a direct email, or I've got a 1300 number, and I'll put all those details as well if you like. But yeah, it's Jane, so it's JANE at the DPE, so it's THEDPE.com. And they can actually, the DPE is Dental Phone Excellence. So just so, but yeah, if they can just shoot me an email directly or contact me. And, you know, I love talking to dentists in America. And, you know, a few of them have actually now started working with me, which is great. And I'm listening to their files, which is even more amazing, and being able to really hone in on where they need help.
Yeah, exactly.
Terry, that was where my big issue was. Yeah, without this technology, without tracking the calls coming into dental practices, you really still don't know what your team is saying. So this has been the cliche. This has been my secret sauce. This has been the thing that's allowed me to really dig deep and help them more. So I'm so pleased that I've started this, and I'm seeing great results with dentists using it.
I really like that, Jim, because what you're doing is you're doing real market research, and you're not just looking at the market, but you're hearing what they're saying. You're listening to the tone in their voice and things like. Question: are you getting transcripts of that as well?
Yes, it actually does come as a transcript, but more important, that we can actually listen and just don't give you the tone. They don't pick up a lot of those nuances that we might miss on those. It's you know, it's just so important. I go back in time into my time machine. I wish we had that in our practice. That would have made even more did. So I'm so pleased to be able to now with my clients and be able to really, you know, bring their practices up to what they deserve to be.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's good. And for those of you watching this, think about what they've just said. Real important to track those incoming calls, listen to what's going on. As our friend Chris Brogan says, we want to grow bigger ears and listen more carefully to what's going on. They're doing that. They're leveraging the technology and bringing in the human touch. That combination, David and Jane do that very, very well. But speaking of technology, David, before we started recording, you were mentioning something to me. I was taking some notes here on it that has really changed a lot of dentists in Australia, and I'm sure that's affecting us as well here in the States, of using the scanners versus the rubber impressions as far as the technology goes. Tell us a little bit about that and just a kind of a 30-second explanation of that.
Terry, since I retired 2.5 years ago off the tools, that's been the biggest game changer for dentists. And even when I went to my dentist to have an impression of my mouth, I was dreading having to have a mouthful of rubber in there for 5 minutes. And he was just able to click and scan with a camera, and then digitally send those images to a laboratory in the United States to have things made, which was just, the technology is just mind-blowing. But there's no mess, there's no lost product shipping, there's no delay, and the fit is so perfect because it's all digital. And it's a game changer. You know, the orthodontists don't need to be using plaster and alginate anymore. It's been a huge game changer for dental practices in the last 2 years. Terry, when Jane was speaking, I think her voice cut out on the spelling of her name. It's
Please
Jane,
do that again.
Yeah, JAYNE at thedpe.com. So the Y dropped out on my signal, even though we're married and we're in the same house. Jane's downstairs and I'm upstairs here, and the Wi-Fi is slightly different between rooms today.
I think
For some
everyone
reason.
listening to that can really understand and empathize with what you're going through right now. We've all had the time when and it cuts out like that sometimes. I'm just messing with you right now, but yeah, it'll do that. And so we've seen that and we're going, we find it. But I still think it's wonderful when we see the technology and how it has really helped us. It's given us the ability to do much more. I think, what if we had had this pandemic, say back in the 70s, and we had everything shut down? All we had was a phone. And at that rate, it was a very expensive. I remember calling over to Australia when I was dating someone there, and we had to pay for the long distance calls internationally. You had to mortgage your house just to pay the phone bills on that. Now, today, it's very easy with Zoom and works so much better.
It's free, Terry, and the phones were bolted to the wall in those days as well.
Black phones with rotary dials.
Yeah.
Those of you that are millennials, Google it. Black phone rotary dial. That's a whole nother world back then. There. Well, as we're wrapping things up here, I'd like to tap into both of you. Just some words of advice that you have, having gone through the pandemic. Australia largely finished with that. I mean, you're doing very well, and looks good. We're getting there. We're making progress here in the States. But for dentists, and when we see these kinds of things happening, I'd like to hear from both of you, starting with you, Jane. Any words of advice, any recommendations that you would give to the dental community, the dentisting humans who are watching this now?
I think now is the time to invest in your business, and that is your team. They're the ones growing the business. The dentist can't grow their business without the support and making sure that the team are on track and really know what their expectations are, and to not be afraid of change. The change is where the gold is. And I think we need to look around and see what other dentists are doing in the profession, and really, share that with each other and lift each other up a bit more. I think that's what we need now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I have found really helped me in my work as a professional speaker and doing things is getting a chance to see what others are doing in other places. I've had some wonderful times in Australia and in England, Canada, different places, and I find you get a different perspective. So those of you dentisting humans who are listening to this, you can get a real advantage, some insights by talking to and getting to know people in other countries, because they do things a little differently. Sometimes it's a little whimsical. Like, for instance, we have hygienists here, and you have a different way of pronouncing that over there. How did you pronounce that? Hygienist?
Hygienist.
Yeah.
Hygienist. Oh, yeah, that's it. Okay, well, there we go. It's a little bit different. It's like there's two languages. We have American, you have Australian. Two separate languages completely on that. But it's fair dinkum, not chunky. It's fair dinkum. And for Americans, that means it's okay. It's all right. Well, David, before we're not going to let you get out of here without giving us some ideas. You've had experience working with many thousands of people. And dentist, you're a certified speaking professional. So like me, you're a member of the Speakers Association there, and dentistry. You've seen what works in dentistry, what doesn't. And for today, someone that's watching this, what would you say to that dentisting human that says, okay, what kind of things should we be aware of, and how do we face the future?
Well, Terry, I think the thing about the future is that we will return back to some normality at some time. At the moment, we're seeing dental practices that are quiet, and we're seeing dental practices that are busy because their patients have had to relocate their work and their living environments. People are working from home, so that if they were working in the city, they're not going to the dentist in the city anymore. They're finding a dentist near their home, near their suburb. So in Sydney, people are relocating out of Sydney because they realise they can work remotely. So they're moving to more rural areas. So where we live, an hour and a half out of Sydney, you can't buy a house, you can't rent a house because of all the tourists from Sydney who are moving here because they can work remotely. But that's changing the mix of patients available. Remember that this will settle. People will go back. Those tall buildings in the city will fill back up with people, and times will return to some normality. So if you're thinking you're busy and it's going to keep going, be careful that there will be an end to that supply eventually of new patients that are relocating just because they're working from home. But while there is a change, you've got to, when the waves are up, you've got to learn how to surf. And that's what dentists are having to do. And you can't say, well, we're busy enough, because there's always wastage when you're busy. And that's why Jane's phone training is so good, because it just captures that wastage. Because when the phone's ringing and you can't deal with it, you can build it out into the future. And that's where the real profits in dentistry are, is making your schedule predictable.
Yes, very much so. Well, dentisting humans watching this, think about this. You've got some opportunities here. We're going to need to do that pivoting that we've all talked about, but by leveraging the technology and using it in the right way, as Jane and David do so well, you will be able to survive. Jane and David, thank you both very much for getting up so early. It's 5:30 in the morning your time, or it was when we jumped on this thing for the checking all that. And I want everyone to know they got up way early to be here with us. And so it would be worth it if you find out about the programs they have. Sometimes you might have to stay up a little bit later, get up a little bit early. I'm finding in today's world that gives you a real advantage on that. So the two of you, thank you so much for being with us today. We'll look forward to seeing you again sometime.
Terry, thanks for having us.
Thank you very much, Terry.
All right. And for you dentisting humans that are watching this and thinking about it, I want you to take it upon yourself to expand and learn even more. These two people are wonderful. I've known them for many years. They have a sterling reputation, and it can be kind of like an inside advantage for you to learn from them things that other dentists around you are not getting because, well, they're focusing on what's here. But now you've got an opportunity to do it. I'm Terry Brock for Dental Nachos, and thank you so much for being part of this community.